Good morning
Good
and
morning and
welcome to
welcome
yet
to yet
another
another
episode of
episode
the
of
Lumiere
Lumiere.
Learning Monday. My guest today is Hema Hattangady, someone who I have been keen to bring on this platform for some time, and she is here as our guest for the season 3, episode 12 that we will do of the Lumiere Learning Monday. Welcome, Hema. Thank you for joining and coming on this platform to talk to us.
Thank you, Deepa. Lovely to be here. I've been waiting to get on your show as well.
I love the background that we've got, Hema. There's like you with your new book, Lift Off, the transformation of Conserve. And we're going to come to that piece in a moment. But how is it feeling to have done this, to have finished writing a project that took you 3 years to do?
Oh, it's absolutely fulfilling. And I think I feel that, it on some days it was like the myth of Sisyphus, where every day I would wake up and have to almost start inspiring myself all over again to do it because I was consumed by self doubt. And we will talk a little more about the whole process later, Deepa. But the feeling is on top of the world. Unfortunately, although the publisher has shut down and now I found a new home for the book, I just feel it's been really really worth it because it's now the story is out there.
Yeah, yeah. Hema, when you did this talk a couple of weeks ago, I sent the link to one of your professors, Dr. Dina Chatterjee, who has been a guest on our show, and she promptly said, "Batch of 22, I am Cal." She was a married student then, and I think that's where we can start this conversation with you, Hema, uh, on how all of this happened and how this has shaped your journey as a leader and as a businesswoman who transformed your family business to make it uh, a large venture capital led and a professionally managed company. So tell us about that journey.
Okay. Great, Deepa. Thank you for that question. And usually when I have to talk about my background, look back at my life, I'm always reminded of a quote which has now become my favorite, which is by this American comedian called Milton Berle, who said, "If opportunity doesn't knock, build a door." And why I love it is I think when I look back at my life, I feel that that's what I've been doing. It kind of sums up my approach to life. So,
Wow.
and also, in retrospect, you must have experienced it yourselves. Um, we see turning points, distinctive turning points in our life, which led us to take one path and not another. And at the time that you are at those crossroads, you're confused, you don't know what to do. Sometimes you don't have a choice, right? And you go down a certain path. But looking back, you realize that path led you to something that was meant to be, that it was meant for the best fate that you could have. And it could have been no other way. But unfortunately, at the time that you're going through it, that's not what you feel. But this is one piece of wisdom I think all of us gain as we get on in life. And in my own life, Deepa, I think I had three very clear turning points. One was when I was 13, when my father retired from his government job in Delhi. I was the youngest of four girls. We grew up in Delhi. And by the time I was 13, it was time for my dad to get on a pension. So we moved down to Dharwad. So that was turning point number one. And the reason I call it so is because it was such a cultural difference, the culture of Delhi, everything, friends, wardrobe, the type of school we went to. And at 13, all those things become so important. Now, of course, you
Yeah.
can poo poo a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
Or you advise your teenage daughter, come on, this doesn't matter as much. There are bigger things in life. But when you're 13, those things matter.
Yeah.
So I think I learned a lot of stuff from that point on about building resilience. The
Mm.
hard way, of course. The school of hard knocks was very much in play.
Yeah.
And so I one of the things that happened to me was that because we moved to a simpler state syllabus for the 8th, 9th, 10th, I did exceedingly well. And that became a fantastic launch pad for me later. So that was turning point
Nice.
number one. So turning point two came when I was 20, when I lost my father to cancer, and I was still in a hostel, still in my final year of BCom, and obviously, grief and loss does things to one, and
Yeah.
some of those lessons and the feelings remain with you all through life.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out at a fairly young age, what do I do with this sense of loss and grief that I have? And I
Hmm.
was very lucky, Deepa, that I was surrounded by people in my college and in the university who
Mm-hmm.
were so supportive. They said, listen, now just refocus, reframe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why don't you get yourself a new goal? Tell yourself you can get this college a rank in the university and give it all you've got. And I
Wow.
remember getting almost angry or irritated with the principal of the college. And I thought to myself, doesn't he get it? You know, I've just lost my dad and I was his favorite, or at least I like to think so because I was the youngest. How can they ask me to forget my grief and to concentrate on studies? But it turned out they knew much more than I did at the time, because that was the medicine that I needed. And two things happened. One was there was a marvelous academic outcome which helped in a whole bunch of ways later on. But I think emotionally, that really helped me to come out of that phase a little less singed than I would otherwise have been.
Beautiful. Wow.
So, yeah. So that
I
was,
can I
yeah.
can feel I can feel what you must have felt when that principal told you, and you probably just wanted to punch him. And then there was wisdom there, a lot of it, and like you say it so beautifully, it helped you come out a little less singed.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I must tell you this as an offside that we are making a documentary film based on the book now.
Hmm.
And I can almost hear my son saying, Amma, first you were so pompous, you wanted to write your book, now you're making a film about it. But I have learned to quell all those voices. And in the making of that film, the crew went to Dharwad, which is where
Hmm.
I studied,
Yeah.
and met my principal. And he's now in his 80s, not quite what he used to be, obviously, not all there. But when apparently my name was mentioned and a photograph was shown and my book was shown, they say that there was a glint in his eye and he remembered and he started talking about everything I had done. And I was
Wow.
so amazed that he remembered me. So these are the things that, you look back and say, hey, it was all worth it for.
So it was a turning point for you, but it was also, in a sense, a turning point for the college and for the principal.
I guess so. I never looked at it like that. Trust you to be so perceptive, but yes, it's something that really elevated the profile of the college, I would think. Yeah. So that was turning point to Deepa, and in a way that kind of brings me to the end of my early years and what happened to me later on when the next phase of my life started.
So the third turning point was actually making a very, very important life decision of not going to the US but staying back in India
Yeah.
to study.
Yeah.
And that is something that young married girls, just married, where you are at crossroads, where the glamour and just the going away would have been so, and just being with your spouse, you were young, both of you
Yeah.
were young. So, what was the thought process at that time? Head and heart, how were you sort of balancing those?
Okay. Well, again, at that point, it was not a choice that I had,
Okay.
because soon after I graduated, I married Ashok, whose family was, our family friends from the time that we were growing up in Delhi.
Okay.
And my mother, obviously felt I was the, fourth one left to be sort of settled. So within a month of graduating, I literally graduated on March 31st, 1984. And by on May 3rd, I was married to Ashok.
Wow.
And Ashok's family, because we were both very young, I was 21, he was 22. People called it, yeah, even in those days, they said, oh, child bride. So now, of course, you would say that. But this was a family we knew, and it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. But Ashok had to go off to the US to do his MS at the University of Texas at Austin in electrical engineering.
Hmm.
So I applied, got admission, but I had applied for my visa in my married name. And you know
Oh,
how immigration cycles go, right? So unfortunately, the time at which I applied with Ashok already there, the cycle was, nobody is going to go if you're already married and you don't have a business here to bring you back home. So I didn't get my visa. But here
oh.
is when this turning point of marriage, which can be, the most amazing thing in for a young girl, turned out to be an even greater launch pad, which I had not foreseen, which is that since I couldn't go,
Yeah.
My in-laws encouraged me. They said, listen, we are setting up a business, right, in India. If you go and do your MBA at Austin, you will learn about American law, American commerce, business rules. Why don't you go try for the CAT, the IIM entrance exam? And I was thinking, my God, me and CAT, I'm a product of SSLC, the state board. I have done my PUC and BCom in Dharwad. How am I ever going to crack the CAT? But I said, let's go with it. What option do I have? And also, what else am I going to do more than that? So I took it, and luckily enough, I got through. And I always tell people, I think it's because of the negative marking. I left out a lot of questions and got into IIM Calcutta. And Dr. Leena Chatterjee remembered, I was the only married student there. And after that, I went into an advertising agency for a while, and then joined the family business. So the answer to your question, Deepa, about what made me not go is really an external decision that was imposed, but it all turned out
Yeah.
for the good. And I think I want to just send out a message here to the
Yeah.
listeners and the viewers that many times, even today, with all this wisdom and experience, so-called wisdom that we have, sometimes when you're faced with a situation, you tend to react, or you tend to
Yes.
feel, oh God, this is the end of the world. What am I going to do? Should I pray? Should I play? What should I do? But we have to learn to tell ourselves, step back and look at yourself from the outside. Look at the situation, change your perspective. And I'm going to quote
Yeah.
from my favorite author, Rosamund Pilcher. She writes beautiful novels. She wrote, unfortunately, she passed away, but she has written some of the most wonderful stories of families and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to just pick one line from her book where she says, once the protagonist was so oppressed, feeling oppressed, and felt that the whole world was kind of coming in on her. You know what she does? She just steps out of the house. It's Scotland. It's cold, wintry morning, and she looks up at the sky, and she sees the magnitude of the sky, and she says, "My goodness me, how big is the world, and how small am I and my silly little problems that were bothering me." And she goes back into the house with a completely changed perspective and a kind of newfound energy to deal with the situation. And that's what I have kind of trained myself to do. And that's what I would urge all of you viewers to do whenever you feel that everything is caving in around you.
How that little flick of a, like it's almost like a magic wand you put around yourself
Yes,
when you change your perspective, and
absolutely.
you are able to actually gain a completely different reframed vision of your problem. So
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, it can be a conversation with your child. It can be a conversation. You've gone to the market and, you are buying fruit, and somebody is standing next to you, and you get into a conversation. In fact, the afterword in my book, the epilogue, was written based on a conversation I had with my daughter's dance teacher. We were talking about raising families, and the company. She said, "How difficult can it be to build a company? Isn't it like you raise a family?" And when she framed it that way, I said, "My God, Shobha, you have said such words of wisdom. I had never quite realized the reason Ashok and I found it gradually easier and easier to run Conserve, to build Conserve, was that our culture was all about being a family. And these little conversations, the conversations I've had with you, it could be anybody, any source of learning. I think they help to change and to provide perspective. What do you think,
amazing.
Deepa?
Yes, I completely agree, because sometimes we kind of put these silos in our head about how I'll be at work and how I'll be at life. But the
Yeah,
moment we know we are the same person, and it's how, in the most authentic way we interact with the world, we're going to
yeah,
be, be it client or be it employee or be it a partner or a vendor, it's the same respectful way that we're going to be with them. For instance, as if respect for the individual is a core value in the
yeah,
family.
absolutely. Well said. Yeah. So I just wanted to go back to something you asked, Deepa, about the business, because can I just share a little bit of
Yes,
story about Conserve
please,
and what really
please.
happened to me?
Yes.
When I came back from IIM Calcutta, worked in an advertising agency. Then Ashok had come back by then, and the family business was growing. And I was really lucky. I got the opportunity to join the family business, and I started with odd jobs. Not there was no shareholding or you're a member of the senior team. I had to prove myself, which was well and good, right? You don't come in and become a senior manager because you have married into the family. That's not what anybody wants. And I learned a lot along the way. But what happened, which actually sort of catapulted me into the CEO position in 3 years flat, was that my father-in-law, who had decided that he was an archetypal engineer, and so was his son Ashok, they wanted to stick with design and R&D. Didn't want to do, and they wanted to manufacture. They didn't want to do marketing and sales. So the contract for marketing on a sole selling basis was given to my father-in-law's nephews, or Ashok's cousins, and they were a good company, very good in real estate. But at some point, things didn't go well with the relationship, and they came to us and said, look, we want to acquire you, and if you don't agree to be acquired, then we will terminate the contract and we're going to start competing with you. And I was sitting there and listening to these conversations. You know how it is, right? You've just come back from one of the premier institutes, management institutes of India, and you've got all this jargon, and you've looked at the contract and said, oh God, this is terrible, it's unconscionable. How can you ask us to merge with you or to be acquired by you when we have the IP? By the way, it was our products that helped you get rich, right? And now you're kind of holding a gun to our head and you're saying you'll give us jobs in your company, which is into real estate. So that didn't wash well with me at all. And I have, Deepa, this is another message for everybody. I've always been an outspoken person. I have never learned to, hold my counsel or hold my tongue. And I irritated the managing director by asking him, you preach about ethics and ethical business, but do you realize what you have done to us? And you're giving us a kind of a Hobson's choice, which we don't want to take. And
Yeah.
that's it. They said, okay, she doesn't want to allow the family to be acquired, so we are going to terminate. And that's what exactly what happened. So next morning, we wake up to find we've got the best ideas, we've got good product designs, but we have bank loans to repay and we have employees' salaries to pay, and we don't have a sales network and we don't have a branding. So the story of Conserve is
Mm,
actually all about how we picked up the pieces from there with the help of T. Thomas, who was the chairman of Hindustan Lever, iconic legend. We used to study about him at IIM Calcutta about the ROI of distributors and redistribution stockists and all that. And he came back from being on the board of Unilever in Asia. He was the first Asian director
yeah.
of Unilever. He came back from London, sorry, and set up India's first private venture capital fund, found us, invested in us. And a year later, Ashok was made the managing director. Ashok was very unhappy. After some time, he told Mr. Thomas, why don't you make Hema the MD? And that's how I landed up in this fortuitous position of being the CEO in the family that I had, of the business, which was set up by the family I'd married into. And that was also the year I had my first son, Raghav. So in 15 months flat, I was new mom and new CEO all at the same time. That was my third turning point, by the way.
Really amazing. I mean, I'm clapping for you as much as I'm clapping for Mr. Thomas, and I'm
Yes.
clapping for Ashok,
Yes.
because it needed three good things to happen for all of this to come through, and
Absolutely.
fantastic.
True.
Yeah. And uh, there is, I'm sure there's stuff that we will read in the book, and I'm curious to come to that part. But before that, as a, you're not an engineer, and this was an engineering company, and it was also doing uh, a very pioneering R&D led products. So were there biases, were there, like when you were sitting at meetings, did you have to sort of fight like this whole bias about being a woman, or being woman CEO and non-engineer, and those things also?
Oh, yeah, lots. In fact, the early years when the agencies overnight terminated the contract, my family kind of, the unsaid or unspoken text was, you kind of made this break, so why don't you go fix it? Which was a good thing, right? Because I had to take the accountability for what I had done. So Ashok, my wonderful patient husband, bought me the first year electrical engineering textbook by B.L. Teraja, and started teaching me the brass tacks of what is cos phi, what is kilowatt, all the electrical engineering parameters, which was Greek and Latin to me. But by the way, when we were on a honeymoon, guess what Ashok taught me on the bus back from Kemangundi? He told me all about harmonic disruptions and distortion. so, so
See,
I had a
the seeds of harmonic disruption were planted right then. Little wonder that Schneider took interest in the company.
absolutely,
No less than Schneider to come. So well thought through in a
yeah,
sense.
very early seeds. So,
Absolutely.
so with this grounding, I had to actually I would heft a 12 kilo product called a portable power and demand analyzer on my shoulder and walk into in I live in Bangalore, that's where the factory was. We would walk into the SP road area, and I would go into these little dealer shops, little retail outlets with electrical stuff spilling out on the streets. And the man sitting there would look at me and say, okay, what do you want? And I'd say, I've come to talk to you about digital meters. Okay, but who are you? Well, I'm from, in those days it was called Enercon, not Conserve. I'm from Enercon. Then they'd say, we don't know Enercon, we only know, and they'd say Crycard, which is the marketing agency's brand name, right? So that was first stumbling block. Nobody knew
Oh.
the brand, although that was the product that they were selling.
Hmm.
So here's another piece of advice, folks. If you are ambitious about your business and you want to make it sustainable and you are building the IP, please make the brand your own, because you're investing in the brand every single day that you invest in the company, whether it's in people, whether it's in in design, manufacturing, you're building the brand.
Yeah.
So unless you have a compelling reason for giving it up, don't. So that was one thing. The second question was, acha, in Hindi they would say, आप आई हो engineer हो क्या? नहीं, मैं तो engineer नहीं. अच्छा, क्या पढ़ा है आपने? As if it was any of their business, but I would say I'm a BCom. So why are you coming here to sell these things? Because we have to talk to engineers in the industries. So I'd say, but I know everything about the product, and so on. Everything was about. It's like you were assumed to be a failure until you proved yourself, and
Moving.
not
Yeah.
at all salubrious environment, because there is cynicism and derision all
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm so glad all those things happened. In fact, today, some of our best friends is that first cynical dealer, that first industrial, the textile mill owner who made me leave in a flood of tears because he told me, what are you charging me 70,000 bucks for this product? You open it and with this spanner and screwdriver, show me all the components and tell me the bill of material. And when I finished totting up the cost of all the components, he said, but it's only 30K bucks and you're charging me 70. And all his lackeys who were lined up, they started laughing at me. And this owner tells them, look at her. She thought she could make a fool of me. And then I was at pains to tell him that this value came from the embedded software and the firmware, which you don't see as a component on that PCB. But it was tough. There was all this non-male, non-electrical engineer, non-engineer kind of situation. But you know what won the day was knowledge and
Hmm.
and a willingness, I would say, Deepa, to admit or accept that maybe you would not get everything right, but bear with me, give me a
Yeah.
chance. You know,
Yeah.
you may have set me up for failure in your mind, but give me a chance. I might surprise you. So looking back, it's easy to talk about it, but in the days that I had to go to all these industrial guys, it was not very easy, Deepa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to tell you one more story, because I think this
Yeah.
happens to a lot of people even now.
Yeah.
As a CEO, I'd be, depending on where I was going, wearing a suit, wearing a sari, and I would go with the local area engineer or the area manager.
Yeah.
There are times in more often than I care to count, whether it was a public sector factory or a government department, where the person, the client I'd gone to meet would talk and make eye contact only with the male. It didn't matter
Ah.
where in the pecking order or the food chain he was, he or she. It was
Hmm.
always
Hmm.
he,
Hmm.
by the way. They're all engineers, right? All male engineers. And they wouldn't talk to me. So he would ask a question, which was obviously meant for me, but he would do it through my colleague. That was really irritating. But I learned to tell myself that this reflects more on him than on me.
Yes. Yeah, there are an alumnus of ours who had told us that she's the doctor, but
Huh.
in the US, she will be assumed, the patient will talk to the nurse who is a male nurse as a doctor, whereas she's whatever number of degrees she has as as
Absolutely.
MD in the ENT space. And she says this is the most common thing that happens even in the US, where there are certain, you just have these filters and the
Yeah.
stereotypes that you play out.
Absolutely. Yeah. True.
Hema, then you've always valued mentors. So tell us maybe a line on why mentors become important in the woman leader's life, or any leader's life for that matter.
Sure. I'd like to start by saying that I have been very lucky with the mentors that I've had in my life, and why they're needed is that it's very simple. We don't know everything. Secondly, they have experienced life in all its dimensions, and it's always much easier to learn and absorb from others than to go through the pain of doing it yourself. And I think the last word on mentors is, if one has the humility to learn, to remember, to thank, I think
Yes,
it comes back to you 100-fold, as it has happened to me in my life. So if any one of you is sitting on the fence about going out and seeking a mentor, I'd say quickly go and get one, because I think it can change your life.
fabulous. The idea of doing the book, Hema, came when?
Yeah. So it came very early on when my chairman, T. Thomas, when he saw what we were doing with the company, said to me, "It's your story is too good to remain silent. Why don't you write a book?" But at that time, I didn't want to pursue it. I was too busy running the company. And like I said, my son thought it was a pompous thing to do. But years later, after we became a case study at Harvard Business School, we were taught at the advanced management program. We were taught as a case study at Babson College for 11 years at the MBA. A friend of mine in India said, "Hema, we talk about you in all our leadership programs, but in India, we don't know about you. Why don't you write your book?" So that was the nudge that
Ah,
pushed me over. And it turned out that her husband became the co author, Ashish Sen. So my two big problems were, why should I tell my own story? Who will read it or want to read it? And the other was, who is going to write it? So that conversation with this friend of mine, Munira, solved both, or gave me answers to both. And here we are. But I must tell you, like I said before, I found it much easier to run my business and transform it in 12 years than to write that book in three.
in writing the book, were you gaining new perspectives on events that probably had happened and you hadn't seen them in that light,
Oh, yeah.
with so many years behind? And is, what, how have had you changed as a leader and as a person by then when you were writing the book?
Very nice. You know, the one thing that happened to me was I was able to get inside the heads of the people who are part of my story, which I couldn't do at the time the story was happening to me. When it was
Mm,
live, I was me and they were there, right? So it is that you versus me kind of syndrome. But when you're writing about it, you are sitting, it's a kind of the balcony view. You're up there looking
yeah.
down, and you are getting in their heads and saying, aha, is that why he or she thought that I was being aggressive or ambitious or whatever? So it changed me. I think it added to a dimension that I had learned to add into my life, the one of making myself vulnerable, learning to listen to people. All of that, I think, got enhanced because I actually was able to see other people's perspectives in writing the book. The other thing also that happened, Deepa, was I had to make sure that because there was family involved that I was writing about, an emotional time in the business, etc., I was able to detach the emotion from the business reality, which at the time it was happening very difficult to do. But years later, when I was looking back, it became almost like, oh my God, why did I not see it like this? So I think the moral of the story is, if you're facing that situation, project yourself several years down the line and pretend you're looking back. I think the perspective becomes very different.
Yeah. Amazing. And now at this tranche, doing the book is really sort of tangibilizing the advice, I guess, you want to give to future mentees and, men and women and people running entrepreneurs. But you have now, and energy is again something which is so core to all of the work that you did. And today energy is also so important. But you've got focus. You've said now you're going to be giving back to women and building women leaders. Maybe we'll close our show with a little bit of conversation around that. on what are you prioritizing on?
Sure. So at the moment, apart from writing, which I've discovered is quite a passion, I'm writing my second book. I do a lot of work in philanthropy. I do impact investing. I have joined the sort of advisory boards of organizations that help to empower women economically, politically, and socially. So, whatever be the nature of the work, if it can get to the grassroots, if it can get to women and youth, in whatever form, that's where I'm at right now. And I am an independent director on a few boards. And of course, I mentor a whole bunch of young people, all pro bono, of course, because I can't get a better thrill than having someone call me up years later and saying, you remember you said that to me, I did it, and this is where I am now. So that kind of fuels your fire, right? Fire in the belly. So that's where I am at, Deepa, in terms of, and I do advise a few businesses that are startups in the energy efficiency space, because I think for Ashok and me, that's been our homeland for all these years and got us to where we are.
And do the both of you team up on some of these
Oh,
mentorships that you all
yes.
do?
Yes, I do some work with NSR Cell. I teach a course on ethics. Ashok gets involved with some mentoring with technology and innovation, etc. And it's always been like that, the yin and yang of of business. Ashok is way beyond technology. Of course, he's a brilliant man, and I'm everything that is to do with non-technology. So we've had some great partnerships there as well.
So the hardware and the software, so to say.
Yes, brilliant. Yes,
So Hema, this could be another conversation, and I'm already have 10 questions in my head, but we've obviously passed the 30-minute mark. And
oh,
I
okay.
do want to say that this line, if opportunity does not knock, build a door. Using the number of times you have used the word launch pad in your conversation, little wonder that your book is called Lift Off. It was the only thing that had to happen once you're on the launch pad. And I can't wait to get my copy of the book. And those of you who know, we have Wise Wednesday, but I couldn't wait, and I wanted to have this a backstory for us to understand what was the genesis of Hema's book, which is why we said let's do a Learning Monday event rather than a Wise Wednesday, which would be only book focused. But I thought the backstories were so fantastic, and thank you for sharing with so much generosity and grace, Hema. I am delighted to have got this opportunity to have this conversation with you.
I loved it, Deepa. I've been really wanting to have this conversation with you, and thank you for making it so enjoyable.
Thank you. And we will be in touch and hopefully meet really soon. Thank you
Sure.
for watching. And I really hope you have many lessons, and both from this conversation, and you will be following Hema's work in so many other facets that she works, and her Lift Off book, of course, that you should grab and read. Thank you, Hema.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you,
Thank
Lumiere.
you.
See you soon.
See you.